Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth podcast from Eternal Remedies series. This one actually being the first of a new series, which we're calling Plastic slash Artificial, which will kick off the launch of our second magazine. And today we are again joined by two very accomplished, impressive guests. One you're familiar with and have heard from before and probably too much, named Mark.
Hi.
And and the other is Lara Menke. And without further ado, I'll let you guys introduce yourself. We can start with Mark.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mark, obviously, and as usual, I'd like to tell you about the things that I write at Eternal Remedy. So if you guys are interested in anything that I have to say, I don't know why you would be, but in the case that you are, hop over to Eternal Remedy and search for Mark, and you'll see what I'm all about.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Lara, and I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the co-founder of Kaya. We are a leadership academy for entrepreneurs and their startups, and we specialize in helping startups create and maintain a company culture that is inclusive as they scale up. I'm a business psychologist by background and been working as a leadership consultant and coach for the last 5 years before I decided to start my own thing.
Nice. One thing I don't think we draw enough attention to is how eclectic and diverse everyone's location and background is. So can we have a quick word on where we're calling from and like where we're from? So I don't know if people know this already, but I'm calling from Brooklyn, New York, and I'm from Toronto, Canada, who is or who are currently in the greatest era of Toronto life. And I'm so very proud of the city right now. So Mark, tell us where you're from.
I'm calling from Chicago, and I'm originally from Jamaica.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's where Usain Bolt is from too. So.
And I am calling from London. I am German. I've lived in Holland, Australia, England for the last 10 years though. So I am a fake German and I live with Scandinavians. My co-founder is Scandinavian.
Even more fake.
Yeah.
Which very nicely segues us into the topic at hand. And so let's get kicking. The first question being to the very thoughtful guests in the room. What does it mean to you to feel plastic or artificial? And can you give examples of that?
I think Lara should start.
Okay, so for me, it means feeling a tension within yourself, feeling that there's what we call in psychology cognitive dissonance, and that is a discrepancy between our attitudes. For example, I hate my job and our behaviors. I go to my job every day. So for me, it's a feeling, a negative emotion.
Mm-hmm. Mark?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Lara. That it's almost this it's almost a feeling of it's almost a warning essentially. So I think overall you feel as if you're not in the place that you should be emotionally.
Mm.
Whether it's that you're doing something that you don't like or you're saying something that you shouldn't say. And I think for me, when I feel most plastic or artificial is when I'm having conversations that I shouldn't be having.
Mm.
For example, if somebody's saying something rather derogatory about women,
Mm.
and I just stand there and let them say it, I tend to have this feeling in my stomach that I should say something. But at the same time, in my defense, I also have an opposing feeling, which says that I shouldn't go around trying to solve every problem in the world. You know,
Hmm.
so I suppose that's when I feel most plastic.
Interesting. So, to me, that suggests almost a feeling of alienation from the both of you, if I'm not misconstruing your points of view.
Yeah.
Where would you say the feeling of alienation is maybe most salient or particularly powerful in our day-to-day lives?
In my experience, working as a business psychologist is definitely in the workplace, because I think there's too many people in jobs that they are not energized by, and that they have to change their appearance or their communication style to fit in, to get promoted. And that can be quite harmful and actually can lead to burnout, for example.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Mark?
Repeat the question again. Let me make sure that I have it down.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think in public life the feeling of alienation is maybe the most salient or the most powerful or present?
Where do I think it is most powerful? I would agree. Again, I would have to agree with Laura. I think it's in the workplace. Um, I think another place that it might be just as prevalent. Well, a little less prevalent, just a tiny bit less prevalent, is in our buying decisions.
Hmm. Okay.
Yes, because I feel as if consumerism does lead to a feeling of inauthenticity.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So I would add to that. I actually think that alienation is the most salient in private life. And that's because the incongruence between what you believe and imagine of yourself and what you're actually experiencing when there's a disconnect in private life, it's particularly pervasive.
Mm,
I'll give an example of that where you could feel unconfident in your relationship at home,
yeah.
and that kind of, I guess, mental incongruence feels heavier because you almost assume that you're supposed to be feeling differently. And I think that is where the sensation of plastic or artificialness is quite powerful, because in the corporate world or in our workplace lives, we can almost justify feeling that way. And so
Mm.
that leads me to the next question, where do, do you think this is a current state of affairs and a necessary one, or can we actually move towards a more wholly integrated self?
I think it all depends on your goals. If you have if your goal is to get to a certain level in your career, or if your goal is to get married and you're certain of it, then please do it. but
Mm-hmm.
but in general, I think it is healthier to, and there's definitely ways to become more in touch with your true self, and be more fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's many things you can do. What do you think?
Mark, you want to go first?
No, no, I have a question for you as well. Like you said that inauthenticity is most often experienced at the level of private life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Wherein you feel as if you should be in another place, but you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you're saying that in the corporate world, you can almost, I don't know, blank your mind to the experience that you're having because you expect to be having that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that the a prime example of inauthenticity? like you have to blank yourself. You have to like withdraw yourself from you have to essentially try not to be present
Hmm.
in order to escape the feeling that you're having at work. Do you think that's true in private life, that you have to try and escape when you're when you're all by yourself?
Mm.
Yeah, I think what you're introducing here is volition and or will. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a really important element in this conversation. And I don't yet know where that should be placed in terms of importance in relation to authenticity. And what I'm trying to say is, are you less or more authentic if you've willed yourself to be? I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're in a public setting like a party and you're speaking to people about something that you are passionate about and you get this
Mm-hmm.
awesome opportunity, I don't know if you would necessarily say that it was by your own volition you came to that, or it was kind of like a natural flowing out of your life essence, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is to say, going back to the example of private life, I don't know what I find particularly problematic or troubling about feeling inauthentic in private life is that you almost can't rely on volition and will. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
can't bring yourself to feeling differently or to doing differently. It's
I
harder to bring yourself into that place, and I think that leads to a deeper feeling of inauthenticity, even though
I
objectively so you may not be more inauthentic.
I
And
see.
why do you think it's harder to in private life to be authentic?
I think it's because publicly we haven't made allowances for that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
There
So,
isn't a space for it.
so the
yeah,
cognitive dissonance is deepened, so to speak, in private life.
Yeah, it carries more weight.
It carries more weight because you don't have an avenue of escape.
Yeah, I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast the other day, and the concept of the silent sufferer came up, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is such a powerful concept and image that is honestly, I think, in my experience, incredibly underspoken.
Mm-hmm.
What really is present in your experience of life are often the unspoken sufferings that you go through, especially at the day-to-day level. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like
yeah,
we have so much empathy for the mother who's struggling with 3 kids. We have so much empathy for the wife who just lost a husband. There's so much empathy for someone who, you know, got fired from their job, whatever it is, in
Mm-hmm.
these monumental events. But we don't speak about the person who goes home and doesn't want to fit into a typical female gender role in the kitchen, but feels as though the relationship calls for it.
yeah. And I think to add to that, there is less emphasis in our society in how we are brought up in investing in our personal development for our private life, which I actually mean is developing relationship skills outside of work. People
Mm-hmm.
tend to invest so much time and money into really perfecting their technical expertise so they can get a certain job. I mean, university is an example, or even leadership training that is offered so you can get that promotion faster as a woman. There's a lot of emphasis, and people take that seriously. They put money and time towards professional development, and they don't do that same thing in their private life. They assume that it'll come natural to them, but it sometimes doesn't. And I think people need to take more time to do that work, put in that work to be good at relationships.
Very good point.
I
What do
would
you think,
agree
Juan?
110% with what Laura is saying. Um, I think I think the most salient example of people not putting enough time into to figuring out their emotional lives is in is in romantic love.
Mm.
I tend to find that if I ask people if they've ever read a book about love and how to do it properly, or just to develop a theoretical understanding of love, most people look at me as if I'm an idiot.
Mm.
And I've always found that fascinating, because if you're going to do something as simple as drive a car, you have to get a manual, you have to practice, and you have to go take a test. But here is something that is fundamentally fundamentally complicated and exponentially more complicated than driving a car, and yet
Mm.
still will never think of taking up a book, or treating it with the seriousness that I think it ultimately deserves.
Mm.
Exactly.
What do you guys think? What feeling do you think we might be running away from or avoiding by not taking the necessary preparatory precautions for private life? Like, what is it that we think we can't accomplish through doing that?
Mm. I think that we run away from the feeling of uncertainty and not being in control and the fear of rejection, because so many in our society, there is a tendency for people to only accept certain types of people, and put people in boxes. And social media also portrays this picture of a certain type of person. And I think by being inauthentic, it's a thing that it's easy to do because of how we are raised, and the emphasis on being polite. For example, here in England, like it's a convention of how we communicate and how we fit into certain ways of communicating. And I think we run away from the fear of facing up to our deepest true emotions.
I find that point very powerful, because you've introduced and connected the fear of failing to the movement of authenticity. And I think that's a profound tension that I know I struggle with, and I can imagine might be present in just, contemporary life in general.
I agree.
I have another question. Would you add anything to that before we move on, Mark?
Yeah, I think to Laura's point, it's a fear of breaking the parental bond.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, most people's worldviews are provided by their parents and by their culture. And I think I think in general we feel a little bit tense once we start to push up against the framework that is provided by our culture, and not necessarily immediate tribal surroundings, but or tribal surroundings in general. The meaning the people that we identify most closely with.
Mm.
So if the tribe says don't do A, and something in us is telling us to do A, we don't know what it is, we don't know why it's telling us to do A, but all we know is that something in us is saying maybe you should do A, just try it. I think most people, if you're lucky and healthy, most people tend to shy away from doing A just because the tribal instinct is so strong in our species.
I agree. I think there's something about anxiety. Like a lot of people suffer from anxiety these days. And it's interesting to me as a psychologist to understand what are we afraid of most of the time in our society. There's so much fear of being judged these days, and so much fear of failure, and so much fear of how am I going to be perceived by these types of people, even people that don't really care about me, but they are important stakeholders. People literally get so afraid and have a physiological, strong, fearful response to artificial things like how to introduce an email and when to send it and why. Like they overthink so much in our world. And I know we live in a bubble, but yeah, and it's actually so far removed from like if the evolutional purpose of fears. And like fear is not, you're not being, your life isn't threatened, but you respond in a way as if it is, which is sad.
It's funny because recently I've been wanting to, I don't know, write a piece or something on this idea that's been stuck on me, in that I actually think life is a matter of convenience more than a matter of fact. And what I mean by convenience is related to the point you're making of being comfortable. We are in such a aggressive move, an aggressive shift towards comfort, that everything meaningful, everything substantial is foregone for the sake of comfort and convenience. And so another question I want to ask you guys is, if we're thinking about, on some sort of hierarchy of human needs, where authenticity sits versus something like convenience, do you think our public discourse has got it wrong in that we're trying to push forward, especially in the workplace these days, we're trying to push forward this movement of be more authentic, be more of your true self, come home to yourself, so to speak. But I think we don't appreciate the importance of how much we need to feel or move towards convenience.
But isn't that what isn't that what modern societies in general have been doing for the last, I think, 150 years?
You think
Where
moving towards convenience?
Yes, wherein we're trying to raise the standard of living for everybody.
I think so.
I agree. I mean, the whole introduction of technology in, for example, the dating world, that's very convenient. You don't have to go up to someone and talk to them anymore. So therefore, actually, you don't have to even learn how to communicate well with someone anymore, because you can just swipe right and left. Like that just is one of the examples. And
it's
I think
great example.
Yeah, I mean, artificial intelligence, I think, is sometimes at odds with emotional intelligence. And we used to talk so much about how important emotional intelligence is, and now we talk about artificial intelligence. I think there's a contradiction, because us relying on artificial intelligence means that we are not practicing emotional intelligence, meaning being in touch with our feelings, having empathy with other people's feelings, and responding to that in a healthy way to build connection and compassion. And I think that's one of the downfalls with convenience. That's what, in my opinion.
Yes, I think have you guys ever heard of the Unabomber?
No, I haven't.
Well, he was this mathematician that I taught at MIT, I believe. He was a brilliant guy, apparently. And he was of the opinion that the more modern societies progress forward, the less human we'll become. So the more convenient we get, the more alienated we'll feel, the more we'll develop mental diseases, the more depression will be a factor in society and whatnot. So his opinion was that we should return to the lap of nature, start hunting and doing all sorts of quote unquote inconvenient things. So yes, it's very interesting that you said that, Laura.
I agree in that, for example, the convenience also comes with fast food or getting food delivered, like us not moving physically anymore. And actually, we know how important physical movement is for our physical and mental health. So I can see the connection totally.
What do you guys think the future looks like? Let's say we fast forward 20 to 50 years. What will be the state of affairs with our social communal world?
Oh, that is a tough one. I think we'll slide more in the direction in which we're already going, where we tend to make things easier and more convenient, and I think that will result in more alienation. Although there might be the counter tendency wherein people realize that we've progressed, we've made some really good moves scientifically. You know, we've come very, very far in terms of technology and industry and all of that. And we might, but our emotions haven't caught up to those progress that we've made in the scientific arena. And we might see a push to remedy that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you actually. I mean, I think we're still trying to learn how to integrate technology well in our lives in the most healthy way. And I mean, it, in my opinion, it can facilitate more connection with diverse people across geographies, and that's great. And it's in a way that is a nice human touch of it. But I think I experience in my work that there's a need, because of the rise of technology and artificial intelligence, for people to connect again on a deeper level and be vulnerable and real with each other. So I think the people that emphasize that in their lives, they will stand out and be desirable because it's becoming such a rare priority for a lot of people these days. So yeah, I think there might be a backlash. At least the people in my surrounding, they're now going towards more, yogi lifestyles of not materialistic things, but connecting with their bodies and their instincts more.
Would you guys say overall then, although the future may not be benign, there would be bright spots of hope within it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what would you say, Stefan?
What would I say? I think we're going to enter crisis before we create the climate for revolution. And I think we are already seeing the foundational makings of existential and psychological crisis, where we're just going to lose grip of why we're here on Earth.
Yeah.
What truth is, what it is to lead a life worth living, because we're in this framework of solving and being outcome oriented and being orchestrated instead of being true, natural, and authentic. And
100% agree.
And the technologies and the systems and the communities that we're building are all moving us towards optimizing the human being instead of allowing our spirits to flourish. However
100% agree.
However fluffy that might sound.
I agree. I think there's this whole emphasis around planning in our society, and that just putting in place milestones and when am I going to get married, by what time will I buy a house, at what age will I get to manager level, all these things that prevent us from taking more risks and trusting the journey, trusting that we will be fine and enjoying every second we have. I agree.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to have to disagree with you guys.
Good.
Like
do it.
I agree that there needs to be a revolution of needed. I think we're generally going through a crisis of needed. But I don't share your optimism in a coming revolution. And that's because I think we don't have a proper conceptual framework of where we're going. And I think the goalpost of what kind of person we want evolution to produce is being shifted around too much. So you're not, as a person, you're not worried about one central thing. You're worried about 20 different central things. Whereas the person in the past, the ancient man, quote unquote, was worried about one central aspect of improving. And I think we're worried about at least about 20. Like we're worried about the relationships between men and women. We're worried about if there should even be, if we should still even use terms like men and women. We're worried about what kind of economy is going to be the most proper. And this is not even my idea, I'm stealing it. So I was reading something, I think it was 2 days ago, where the author was saying that a slave was only concerned with freedom. It's just concerned with one thing. But a member of the working class in England was concerned about the type of textiles he was using, whether it was right to be a socialist versus a capitalist. And all that resulted in was that the slaves got freed and the working class man remained the working class man.
Wow.
Mm.
That's a really powerful thought.
I agree. I mean, life at least seems to have become a lot more complex. We worry about how many likes we get, how we dress, and what we eat,
Yes.
and how we get to work, where we travel to. Like, I agree, but I hope,
Mm-hmm.
I see little signals that the people who strip it back to basics, the mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of rise of that, and yoga and
Mm-hmm.
organic food, those are, I think, signs for me that there's a minority of people that are going to try and get us back to basics, which is actually health and relationships.
Yeah,
In my
survival.
opinion. Yeah.
Baseline.
Like, so
survival.
exactly.
Mm-hmm. Let's wrap all this up on a final note, hopefully a more positive note, in that, what would you guys say if there's 3 bits of things we can focus on and simplify in our approach to responding to these times? If we're thinking about the tsunami of meaninglessness and disengagement and inauthenticity in our world, what are 3 things you would tell people who are listening that they can work on today?
Well, I think one thing people can do straight away is to deepen their self-awareness, because without knowing yourself deeply, you don't know what to change. So what I mean by self-awareness is knowing what is energizing to you as an individual, knowing what your natural preferences are, knowing what your strengths are, knowing what your blind spots might be, so that you are confident and conscious in the choices you make to make your life less artificial. And you can do that in many ways. You can do that by asking more feedback from people in your life, people that you care about. And it can also be a more physical approach. So one thing that I personally do to help me be more in touch with my true self is not revolutionary, but I do yoga every day, because it helps me get out of my head and into my body. I really think it has made a massive difference in my life, because I now feel like I can make better decisions day to day, because I have learned to trust my instincts, and my instincts are always the things that are most authentically me. And it helped me connect with people that match my vibe. So those 2 things I think you can do.
Brilliant. Mark?
So my 3 things are, and I don't know if they're in proper order, but I'll try to make them coherent and consistent logically. I'd say 1, you should watch yourself like you're studying for a test. Like, yes, learn. Just watch every emotional reaction that you have to a thought, to a person, to anything, and you don't have to. You don't have to judge yourself when you're having these emotional reactions. You just have to note them. So, watch yourself like you're studying for a test is my first one. The second one is to associate with people who have different points of view than you. And you can do that if you're rich enough by traveling to another country, or just by checking out podcasts of people who you might disagree with religiously or politically or whatnot. And then the third one is to develop a historical understanding of yourself. Um, so understand the forces that are that have gone before you, that have led up to your present state of being in the world. Whether it's the a revolution, the French Revolution, which out of which came the notion of capitalism, or if you wanted to, you could go back all the way to the Greeks and look at Plato, who gave us the notion of truth as this thing that is set and objective. So yes, I think if you do that, you will be well on the pathway to living a more authentic life.
Mm. I love it. Thank you both for those responses. If I may add my point of view to this, my three would be: number one, and probably not in any particular order, and they're all to some degree, if not to a high degree, interconnected. But number one would be redefine success, add a quality to it instead of a quantity to it. And with that, rethink what it means to have riches and position it as something to have richness. Because I think ultimately, within the concept of richness is a qualitative life experience. And that, going on vacation with people who mean a lot to you, and no matter how elaborate or not it is a rich experience, even though it may not cost you much. So redefine success, have new metrics that aren't metrics. The next one is break and re-break again the narratives that feel too simple, you've fallen into, come too easy to you, and question and re-examine them often and always. Even the most fundamental ones, like ask yourself if you're happy, ask yourself if you're sad, ask yourself if you're in love, ask yourself if you're engaged in your life, and constantly revisit the narratives that you've inherited from your outside world, from the tribes you subscribe to, from the theories you subscribe to, and question if those are still true to you today in this moment. The last one is probably the most practical, and I hope the listeners actually take this one to heart, is find a project rooted in love and practice until it kills you. And what I mean by that is do everything you can, however pragmatic or not, to find the thing that you don't get tired of, and dedicate yourself to it, learn about yourself in it, learn about others, connect to others in it, and do it to the point where it's beyond life itself. It could bring you to death. Those are my thoughts.
I love it. Kat, you just inspired my third one because I only said two.
Good, finish. Finish.
It related to what you said is fully leaning into joy, totally embracing joy, because joy is one of the most vulnerable of all emotions, and just prioritizing fun in your life means that you will naturally connect to who you are, and because energy builds on energy and positive energy builds on positive energy. So leaning into joy consciously.
Love it. Thank you both. This is very meaningful, inspiring content. This is good.
I hope so.
Let's wrap up here if that's cool.
Yes.
Thank you everyone who is listening in from afar, wherever you are. Please somehow involve yourself in the conversation. We're so excited to be able to throw our thoughts and words to you in the form of the podcast, the magazine, the online website. But we also want this to be a bit of a two-way street. So find us on Twitter at Eternal Remedy. Throw your thoughts and your reflections on the podcast. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Instagram, all at Eternal Remedy, for the same reasons. Before we close, Laura, would you like to plug anything?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me to join your podcast. It was very inspiring to talk to you too. And if you listeners want to find out more about the psychology of connecting with your authentic self, you can find us at on our website, kaya.space.
Cool. Mark, any last thoughts? Leave us on a memorable note.
Oh, that's easy. Guys, if you listen to me, find a building, preferably an abundant building, and light fire to it. The most authentic. I'm kidding. No, no. It's just thank you guys for listening. It means a lot to us.
Even if you want to watch the world burn.
Even if you want to watch the world.
Until the next time, take care.
Bye.
Bye.